Newt Gingrich climbs to the top among Republicans.
We'll tell you which voters are fueling all this turmoil in the Republican race.
And Congress finds itself in some pretty sorry company. I'm Frank Newport, Gallup editor-in-chief.
I'm Susan Page, Washington bureau chief for USA Today.
And this is Election Matters. We have a new leader.
It's remarkable. Newt Gingrich was at 3%, less than the margin of error in the polls that we took over this summer. Now he's at the top of the field. And in fact, he's the sixth candidate or potential candidate to lead in the Gallup poll this year, which just shows you how incredibly tumultuous this race has been.
Absolutely. You had a chance to talk to former Speaker of the House Gingrich in Florida this past week. Does he think he'll win?
He's willing to put numbers on it, odds. He says there's a 40% chance he'll get the nomination, a 40% chance Romney will get the nomination, a 20% chance that someone else will get the nomination. And if he gets the nomination, he says he is convinced he will beat Barack Obama.
So he's quantified it. He's a PhD, although not in statistics and history, but nevertheless, he's a quantitative kind of guy, I guess. We'll see what happens. His support, interestingly, and this is a fascinating finding, Susan, is higher among older people, Republicans, 65 pluses, than anywhere else. In fact, among 18 to 29-year-old Republicans, we find that he gets about 4% support. So his support skews way old. But maybe that's a plus, because older voters are more likely to vote.
Yes, that's true, although a huge generation gap in the GOP. We see that Ron Paul and Herman Cain do well among younger voters. Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich do well among older voters. But never the twain will meet. Romney is the only candidate who does relatively well in every age group.
That's right. And it's not just age simpatico, because Ron Paul is 70 plus, I believe, and yet he's always been the darling of the very young voters, maybe because of his internet strategy overall. Herman Cain, we were sitting here talking about just a couple of weeks ago. Now he's down, as I mentioned. His positive intensity score is moving down. His position in the poll is moving down as well. But one thing we've noticed is his recognition is now at 88% among Republicans, Susan. That's tied with Newt Gingrich and just 1 point behind Mitt Romney. So he's gone from total obscurity among Republicans earlier this year to where he's now essentially among the best known Republicans that exist.
And you know, that's probably good news as he's selling his book. And also if he turns out to be a TV host on Fox, that could serve him well.
Speaking of television, Jon Huntsman, former governor of Utah, was on Saturday Night Live. Did you see that?
I did see it.
He did the weekend update, kind of clever. But in our data, he continues to lay an egg. That's what they joked about, that he had moved up from the margin of error to low single digits, but he's at 1% of the vote in our current GOP trial heat.
And when you look at Republican voters, he has actually a negative positive intensity. That is, Republicans are more inclined to dislike him, to not feel favorably toward him, than to feel favorably toward him. And so that makes it hard to see how he puts together a winning campaign.
Absolutely. It's like bad news and more bad news for Governor Huntsman. One is his recognition is at 48%. So unlike Herman Cain, he's been unable to gain any name ID traction among Republicans. And the second bad news is among those Republicans who do know him, they don't like him, at least on our intensity measures. So it doesn't look like he's going to be going anywhere based on our data. Of course, big news this week is the supercommittee failed to come up with an agreement. I guess the question everybody asked from an election perspective is, will this make a difference in the coming year? Well,
I think it could make some difference. We saw when Congress got up to the precipice and failed to deliver this year in April and again in early August, that economic confidence declined. People felt less good about their own finances. That could reflect how much Christmas shopping people do, or whether a small business owner decides that he or she can hire another employee. So it could have an actual consequential effect on our economy.
But in terms of Americans' views of Congress, can't go much lower. A lot of reporters have asked, they called me up and said, well, is this going to hurt Congress' image? Well, if it's 13% job approval right now, lowest in history, how much lower can it go, I guess, is the real question there. But it's terrible now. And also, all of our other measures of federal government are so low, it's unclear how that's going to affect that. But blame. I mean, everybody says, well, is this going to hurt the Republicans or hurt the Democrats? You saw over the weekend leaders of both parties blaming each other. It's very hard, at least for me, to disentangle now what impact all this extreme antipathy towards Congress is going to have on the election next year.
Republicans and Democrats agree on almost nothing these days. They did agree, though, that they wanted the supercommittee to compromise and to reach a deal, and that is exactly what does not seem to be happening.
We saw a lot of video over the weekend, Susan, on the Occupy Wall Street offshoots, particularly out at UC Davis near Sacramento, those now famous YouTube videos of the campus police spraying pepper spray in the faces of the silent, demonstrators who were just sitting there, kneeling there in front of them. We have a new poll, a new USA Today Gallup poll that shows one thing is that despite all that visibility, a lot of Americans tell us, well, I'm not really following it. And when we ask their opinion on it, they say, I don't really have an opinion on Occupy Wall Street because I don't know that much about it.
Well, it's interesting. A majority of Americans, 6 in 10, say they don't know enough to understand about their goals, to judge about their goals. Well, it's true that Occupy Wall Street tends to have not very clear goals. Even if you go out and interview some of the demonstrators, it's not like they have a manifesto that they want to follow. Even so, 1 out of 4 Americans say they are supportive of the Occupy Wall Street movement. So clearly it's touched a chord with some Americans who feel that corporate interests are too big, moneyed interests are too powerful, and that they're getting left out of the process.
Yeah, and those people who are positive tend to be Democrats, but again, it's so low-key in terms of our data that it's unclear that the Democrats are going to, or the Republicans, either one, are going to be able to make a lot of hay out of it, so to speak, in a political perspective. Susan, most interesting finding of the week, we talked about Congress approval being so low, 13%. The disapproval of Congress, job approval, doing a bad job, don't approve, disapprove, however you want to phrase it, is 82%. We kind of look back in history. Different measure, but we have asked over the years, Americans, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of a lot of different people? And boy, Congress is up there in terms of that 82% negative score with some pretty notorious company.
Here's some people who are are more popular than Congress. Yasser Arafat, Fidel Castro, Slobodan Milosevic. That's pretty sorry company.
Yeah, the only people absolutely. The only people we could find that had higher unfavorable negative ratings than Congress has now in terms of disapproval were Fidel Castro at one point, a couple of times, Osama bin Laden. After 9/11 had higher unfavorables. Saddam Hussein had higher unfavorables. And back in 1998, Monica Lewinsky had about the same unfavorable then as Congress has disapproval now. How's that for a comparison?
Of course, none of them actually had to run for election.
That's true. That's true. Well, we'll monitor these things and we'll see. Congress all going home, aren't they? How long are they off for Thanksgiving?
For a break, and then they'll be back.
Back hard at work, right? We'll see if they can get anything done. The American public, as we said, very negative on Congress at this point. That's Election Matters. I'm Frank Newport, Gallup Editor-in-Chief.
I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today.